Hi and welcome to today's live reading from The Player by Jacquie Biggar, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. Roy Donaldson tightened his gloves and adjusted his helmet before giving the Warhawks goalie a nod. Time to get down to business. He dropped into defensive position, ignoring the catcalls coming from the Edmonton fans. It was always like this when they played away from home. He'd gotten used to it and actually even kind of liked the anonymous insults and whistles. It only spurred him to try harder, beat the odds. The puck dropped, signalling the beginning of the third period. Their team captain, Mac Vanowski, stole it away from the Oilers and passed it off to their right wingman, Cooper. Cooper headed down the ice like his skates were on rails. The puck nestled like a baby in the pocket of his stick. Vanowski stayed off his flank, keeping the Oilers' centre busy dodging his moves. Meanwhile, Laszlo protected his left to chance from the crowd. Roy moved up, prepared for a lightning-fast backward pass, Coop's trademark move. They were close to the attack zone now, the tension thicker than the ice beneath their feet. The sharp slap of his stick sending the puck shooting across to Laszlo and then Laszlo's back to Coop, combined with the announcer's excited dialogue, the flash from the Jumbotron big screen, the scents of ammonia and popcorn, and the musty eau de cologne all hockey players wore with their sweaty gear. He lived for this, the all-encompassing thrill of the game. Win or lose, winning preferably, it didn't matter, as long as he had the Warhawks. A roar from the crowd shifted his attention from Laszlo and Coop to Mac and the captain from the other team. Gloves had come off, and they were shoving each other hard against the boards. The thick plexiglass rattled with the force of their blows. If Mac messed up that bad leg of his again, the new coach would have his head. Where the hell were the refs? The thought no sooner crossed his mind than the whistle screamed. He was too far down the ice to be much help, so he skidded to a halt and glanced up at the clock to see how much time was left in the period. 15 minutes. Plenty of time to teach these guys a lesson, even with the penalty. They were just one goal down at the moment, just the way he liked it. They played better from behind. More incentive to kick some Oiler asses. They'd barely made the playoffs last season after Vanowski blowed out his knee, and then when all that crap with Coach Harris and Doug Edwards went down, he'd half expected the team to get kicked out of the league, but here they were, found notoriety and all. Laszlo had gotten into the thick of it, and it was taking 3 referees to pull him and Mac away from the Oiler player. It would take time to run the replays to determine who was at fault. He glanced up at the Jumbotron, expecting to see the fight in slow-mo. Instead, the screen was filled with a shot of a woman holding a giant sign in the stands. Hearts and kisses framed the words, "Be mine, Roy Donaldson." He shook his head. Exhibitionists abounded at these events, but he'd never understood the draw. If he wanted to court a lover, it wasn't going to be in the midst of a crowd of strangers. He preferred a king-size bed and silk sheets when wooing his women. The camera focused on the crazy-eyed gaze of a dark-haired woman, and Roy swore. Olivia. His gut clenched. Shit, what was she doing here? The woman was a menace. She'd stalked him until he'd been forced to take out a restraining order against her. Yet, here she was, smiling into the camera as though she had every right. Son of a... Samson, you playing or what? Cole yelled from the goalie's net. Roy's gaze remained on the fixed screen, willing his eyes to be deceiving him. But he was right. It was the woman he'd stupidly thought himself in love with. Olivia had hid her face now, as though realising she'd screwed up. Welcome to his world. The repercussions would be all over the news broadcasts by the morning. He'd have to find someone to handle the fallout. And why was he thinking about the aftermath when his life had just exploded in his face? Save the anger for later, when he was alone. It wasn't like it was the first time he'd betrayed, after all. He turned his back on the Jumbotron. Yeah, man, let's play. Chapter 2, 1 month later. Patience Kennedy sat next to her boss and watched the fuming man below them swishing from one end of the ice to the other, lap after lap. Even though tension rolled off him in waves, he was mesmerising to watch. Powerful, graceful, potent. She'd seen enough pictures of him to know he had an intensity that probably stood him in good stead on the rink. It didn't translate well for publicity, however, which is why she was currently freezing her caboodle off on his bench. She'd warned Linda she had no expertise with sports. Her thighs quivered at the mere thought, but it didn't seem to matter. Linda wanted what Linda wanted, and she'd decided Patience was perfect for this client. Roy Donaldson, the Victoria Warhawks golden boy, winner of the James Norris Memorial Trophy for Best Defence, an all-star athlete who'd just been propositioned on national media by a kooky ex-girlfriend creating a media storm. Donaldson wasn't playing his A-game right now, and it was costing the team. They'd lost the last 4 games and had dropped in the rankings. Any more losses and the playoffs were over for them. Sayonara to their juicy bonuses. "Did you hear a word I just said?" Linda asked, tapping her pen against her notepad. She didn't trust the internet. Everything was done old school. Funny, considering she owned one of the premier PR firms in the country. "The guy driving the Zamboni could hear you." Patience smiled to soften her words. "Yes, I know the GM is an old friend and there's more than meets the eye to the story. I'll do my best, but this is out of my comfort zone. So far out it could be in another stratosphere." "That's all I'm asking." Linda turned a shrewd gaze her way. "Besides, a little bird told me you think it's time I gave you a promotion, maybe even a junior partnership." Patience cringed. She was going to kill Tammy. Her best friend, and Linda's sister, meant well, but what they chatted about during a Friday night wine and a movie binge was sacred. "To be fair, it's been 5 years and I feel I brought something to your business. My clients, except the Mastersons who hate everyone, all left glowing reviews on the website, which I helped update, by the way. And I appreciate, thank you." Linda's eyes sparkled with suppressed amusement. "No wonder I hired you. You could sell coffee in a tea house." "That's why I need you to handle Mr. Donaldson's publicity. The Warhawks are in a vulnerable position. Negative exposure reflects badly on the league, and they can't have that. It all comes down to finances. The NHL works hard to portray a positive experience for their fans and penalise the players who jeopardise that image." She held up a bejeweled hand before Patience could jump to her new client's defence. "Before you say it, I know it's not fair. Mr. Donaldson is the fall guy for a situation not of his own making, but that's the nature of the beast. He's not as important as the team, which makes our boy down there," she nodded to the skater shooting slapshots into a net at the far end of the ice, "expendable." Patience frowned. She didn't even know the guy and already felt sorry for him. The tabloids had been merciless, running the story of the dropped girlfriend as though he'd committed a major betrayal. Personally, she was surprised it hadn't turned into old news already, but it seemed as though a smear campaign had been launched against Mr. Donaldson. Paparazzi followed him everywhere, snapping photos of a grim, foreboding face. Not exactly family-friendly viewing. Trouble was, he preferred his privacy, but he wasn't going to get it with the playoffs starting in April. It was all hands on deck, so to speak. "Let me get this straight. Mr. Donaldson is hiring us to clean up his image so he can be left alone to prepare for the finals." Linda shook her head. "You're half right. We do need to give him a fresh look, but he didn't hire us. In fact, he doesn't want anything to do with the PR firm, even if we are the best in the business." Wonderful. Patience didn't mind a challenge, but something told her she was going to regret this assignment long before it was finished. Her Irish-Italian instincts were screaming to leave while she still could. Of course, she didn't listen. "Okay," she said. "Who is our benefactor then?" Linda sidestepped the question by pointing at the player leaving the rink. "Better go down and get the meet and greet over. I have complete faith in you to get this done in the month which we've been given." She gathered her satchel from the seat beside her, stuffed the notebook away, and held out her hand. "Do this, and we'll have a serious conversation about that partnership. Deal?" Patience contemplated the man, feeling like a voyeur. Now that the practice had ended, his shoulders were slumped and he repeatedly rubbed his temple as he left the ice and disappeared from view. He thought he only had a headache. Wait until he heard what she had to say. She sighed and turned to her boss, sealing the deal with a shake. You owe me a cannoli. Roy stripped down in the empty locker room and stepped into the shower, sighing as the warm water massaged his back. He'd paid a hefty price to get the arena to himself, but it was worth the fee to escape the merciless eyes of the press. If he wasn't under contract, hell, who was he kidding? His career was all he had left. He wasn't going anywhere. His cell phone jingled, wrecking the quiet. He tipped his head back, letting the water roll over his face. Olivia. Again. He had nothing to say to her. She had made a fool out of him in front of his entire team. Unforgivable. He rubbed his face and blinked unseeingly at the tiled wall. 2 months. He and Olivia had been happy together. Well, content. God. If he hadn't come home early that day and found her ensconced in his bed. They'd agreed to take things slowly, enjoy the natural growth of the relationship. Instead, she'd stolen his keys, inserting herself into every part of his life, calling his mother, arranging a dinner with his teammates, adding her name in a relationship to his Facebook profile. He pounded the wall, then bowed his head, failure ringing in his ears. He rinsed off and left the shower stall, hands squeezing the water from his overlong hair. He needed a cut. A startled screech stopped him in his tracks. A curvy brunette sat half-turned on the bench. She'd covered her eyes and held out his towel, reminding him of a pin-up from the 50s, with her flouncy dress, short sweater and colourful knotted headscarf. Who the hell are you? He snarled, making a grab from the towel to cover his privates, though it was probably too late for modesty. So much for having the place to himself. Patience Kennedy. She peeped at him from an oversized pair of mint green glasses that made her brown eyes look huge. Great. They were sending ingenues for reporters now. Didn't matter, he wasn't buying into it. Well, Patience Kennedy, this is the men's locker room. You aren't supposed to be in here. Tell whatever rag you're working for, the whole sex kitten thing is wasted on me. There, that should send her running in 1, 2. The young woman erupted off her seat in the most interesting flurry of bounces and wiggles. Hands on hips, she glared at him in all her bifocal glory. That is a horrible sexist thing to say. Her eyes lowered to his bare chest and the towel tucked haphazardly around his hips. She jerked her head up, cheeks flushing in a becoming pink. This is a misunderstanding. My boss suggested I come down and introduce myself after your practice. I wasn't expecting... Her hands flapped in front of her like a frightened peacock attempting to take flight. Unexpectedly, he grinned. Never seen a naked man before, Patience Kennedy. He double-checked the towel and chuckled when she sealed her eyes shut. Don't worry, your virtue is safe with me. The smile faded. I learned from my mistakes. He looked around for his clothes, realised that he'd left them in his locker, and Kennedy stood in his path. I wish I could say this has been fun, but... He waited until she reopened her eyes, then jerked his chin in the direction of the other room. She tipped her head, and a heavy sweep of chestnut hair slipped over her shoulders, to cover the full plumpness of her breast. Not that he was looking. Sorry? He saw the moment the light bulb went on. Her eyes widened, and her mouth made a remark. Oh, that hooked his attention. She had a beauty mark. My clothes are behind you. Unless you plan on holding me hostage until you get her story. And why the hell did that not sound like a bad idea? She jumped out of his way and promptly twisted an ankle on the wet bricks. Ouch, she cried, leaning over to cradle the injury. The damp sweater was too small, her breasts were hanging out of the top, jiggling with every pain breath she took. He was such a pervert. He crouched to get a closer look at the injury, tucking the towel between his legs. Yep, she'd sprained it. Who came into a locker room in 3-inch heels anyway? You'd better sit down. You can't walk on it like that. He took her elbow, frowning when she jerked away. Don't tell me what I can or can't do. It's fine. She groaned as she put her weight on the foot in question. Her face paled as she reached behind her for the bench, easing her rump down. Damn it, what else can go wrong?